confirmed a police officer who is blocking the roadway from Amnicola Highway and Wilcox Boulevard. He just stepped over to tell me as much as he could. He says that from what he knows, this whole thing, quote, this whole thing started on Lee Highway with a shooting incident there.
The project manager says someone came into this garage and stole more than $5,000 worth of this tile. Some of the drugs were found in an iced tea can like this one, found inside a hidden compartment. Once Franklin was left unattended, he escaped through this hole in the fencing and then went on straight through the woods. Cindy, Greg, does this situation feel familiar to you? Right now I'm driving around downtown Chattanooga trying to look for a parking spot. Even now, just sitting inside this car, the temperature reads above 150 degrees. Good morning, Latrice. I've been out here since about 4 a.m. and I can tell you that this is starting to look like there's some progress being made. The truck has now been turned upright. The contents are being pushed off to the side of the road now by a bulldozer. Cindy, Chief Fletcher tells us his officers were at the right place at the right time, and you'll see their brave rescue from one of the officers' body cameras. It shows them rushing inside the apartment, risking their own lives to save others.
These were officers who were actually looking for a bad guy, and they were trying to serve a warrant. And while that was happening, they realized that there was a fire and somebody was in danger.
Officers Aaron Williams, Matthew Robertson, and Daniel Russell were at Ridgeway Apartments Sunday night when Janice Beasley returned home to her apartment and saw it filled with smoke.
I didn't even smell it, nothing. I just heard the smoke detector going off and I keyed in, and that's when the smoke hit me and I came back out with my kids. I didn't even make it in there.
She called for the officers and they rushed inside.
I'm gonna go do a quick peek.
This is body cam video from one of the officers. Inside, they found Beasley's father, who was unresponsive on the couch.
You good? Breathe, man. Your apartment's on fire, boss.
We didn't know how long he'd been in there and how much he inhaled. It was scary.
Beasley didn't think anyone was home and even told the officers her apartment was empty. But two of them went inside anyway. The fire started from food left cooking on the stove.
He remembered that he left the steak on the stove and he fell asleep, and after that, I don't know.
Beasley is still in shock after her father's rescue. She had no idea how the officers got there so quickly until we told her they were serving a search warrant a few doors down.
And that's what I did not know. I'm like, did they get a call? Because there was no one outside but me and my two kids.
What she does know is Officer Williams, Officer Robertson, and Officer Russell helped save her father's life.
Yeah, I thank them so much for that. I do. That was a hero last night.
The two officers who entered the apartment were treated for smoke inhalation and are now taking a few days off before returning back to work. Beasley's father was taken to the hospital last night for treatment, and he's expected to make a full recovery. Live in the studio, Kelly McCarthy, Channel 3 Eyewitness News. With each step Victoria Peacock takes, she's closer to the next call.
Hello, 911.
The next life-changing moment for a complete stranger who needs her help.
Are you sure you don't need police, fire, EMS?
Peacock stays on the line until help arrives. When her job is done, it's back to the treadmill to calm her nerves and prepare for the next time the phone rings. Some calls are easy to shake off, others are not.
A couple months ago, we had a really bad accident on I-75, and once it was all concluded, I spoke to a party who had lost a loved one in that accident.
The crash happened on June 25th when a tractor trailer slammed into stalled traffic. 6 people died. Many others were injured. When Peacock picked up that day, it was a man from Morristown looking for his wife.
I didn't even know there was a wreck until I looked on the website.
Okay. Can you tell me what kind of vehicle she was driving? We ended up realizing and talking him through it and finding out that he was indeed a family member of someone who had passed away in the crash. That's probably one of the calls that sticks out in my head the most since I've been working here.
It's a call that Rick Watts never wanted to make.
It said multiple fatalities.
Is that what it says online?
Yes, multiple
Okay.
fatalities. Multi-car accident with multiple fatalities.
Okay. I could just hear the sorrow in his voice on the other end of the phone, and I knew that there wasn't really anything I could do for him because the accident had already occurred.
Watts would later learn he lost his wife, his mother-in-law, and his 2 stepdaughters in the crash. Tiffany Watts and her mother, Sandra Anderson, were on their way home from the Atlanta airport. They had just picked up Tiffany's 2 daughters, Kelsey and Savannah Garrigus. Tiffany called her husband's phone that night as they were passing through Chattanooga.
But I dismissed the call, and I regret that. Maybe not. Maybe the accident would have happened while I was on the phone.
Watts tried to call back, but his calls went unanswered. That's when he went online and saw reports of the terrible crash.
I called off and on all night long. I don't know how many times I called the different ones.
He describes it as the worst night of his life. It wasn't until the next morning he knew for sure his family wasn't coming home.
When I heard the knock, I knew, and my heart sank. And so I got up and walked around to where I could see outside, and there were police officers. One of them was a friend of mine, and he volunteered to do that. And so that was how I found out.
It was confirmation PCAC was never able to provide. She later learned Watts did lose his family. A life-changing moment that stays with PCAC as she waits for the next call.
A Ringgold family mourned the loss of their Marine in 2007, thinking he never had the chance to have his own family.
But a recent phone call changed everything, and it certainly makes Veterans Day extra special this year. Channel 3 Eyewitness News reporter Kelly McCarthy talked with the family to find out how that phone call changed their lives forever, in an interview you'll see only on 3.
Lance Corporal William Chambers was proud to be a Marine.
When 9/11 happened, that's when Will started getting military minded, and that's pretty much, that was his focus.
The 20-year-old who was stationed in Iraq died in 2007, serving the country he loved. His mother, Kathy Mabe, was left to mourn his death and hopes for his future. Chambers never had the chance to have a family of his own.
It's after a lot of the grieving and the pain had passed, you know, it would have been awesome to have a piece of him back.
A wish that came true earlier this year. 8 years after her son's death, Mabe got an unexpected call from his high school girlfriend.
You know, and then when we got the proof of the DNA test, I was shaking and crying. I was so happy.
DNA results showed that Will Chambers left behind a son. News that was shared with 9-year-old Blake a day before Channel 3 was invited to tell his story.
He is so much like Will, it's just unreal.
2 people so similar, yet total strangers. Chambers never knew he had a son. He died when Blake was just 2 years old. Now the Mabe family hopes to make up for lost time.
This family came to life yesterday, you know, 'cause so much pieces of us died when Will did, and Blake brought it back to life.
New life that has created tough conversations for Blake as he learns who his father was and about the sacrifice he made for his country.
Honestly, every time I come to this grave, I lay down on the ground and hug it, and I see a picture of him, I go up to it and hug it.
Kathy Mabe says she sees her son every day. In the face of a grandson she now plans on spending the rest of her life getting to know.
No matter what you have or who's there, you're always incomplete when you lose a child, especially if they don't have children. And, you know, Blake's perfect. He's what we need.
I'll share more heartwarming details about what Blake and his new family have in store for the future and how he's learning all he can about his father and his father's sacrifice for his country. That's coming up at 6 o'clock. In the studio, Kelly McCarthy, Channel 3 Eyewitness News. A volunteer artist is working on this Memorial Day to complete the painting honoring Chattanooga's fallen 5.
Carson Holmquist, Randall Smith, Tommy Sullivan, Skip Wells, and David Wyatt. Those are the 5 things you need to remember about that day.
And their 5 faces will forever be remembered in Chattanooga. But just as this mural is to honor the lives lost, it's also for the families they left behind.
The whole reason I started this was for Carson Holmquist's son, Wyatt. I'd seen a picture of him holding up that sign that said, we've waited 244 days for this.
Local artist Kevin Bate says this picture is a big reason he took on the project. It shows Sergeant Carson Holmquist's wife and young son Wyatt welcoming him home after his last deployment.
Just that one sign just destroyed me. It was so sad for me. I've got a son about Wyatt Holmquist's age.
Bate hopes the widows, parents, and children of the fallen 5 know there's always a place for them in Chattanooga, and their family's sacrifice will always be remembered.
I wanted to make sure that if there was something here to remind everybody, but especially Wyatt Holmquist. Anytime he came through here, so he could remember his dad, see him as a larger-than-life figure, because I think he is.
On this first Memorial Day without them, Bate asked for a flag to fly while he finishes the painting.
I kind of threw a request out on Facebook to see if anybody had like a big flag that I could hang on the scaffolding.
What was brought to the mural site was more than he could have ever imagined. A flag that has waved overseas and at home.
A flag that had flown over Iraq and at the Capitol.
And on this Memorial Day, it's flying over our fallen 5.
These are men who put on their uniform and they were working for us. I think that every bit of honor is due to them.
With one portrait still left to be finished, Bates says the Fallen 5 mural will be completed by July 16th, 1 year after the shootings. In Chattanooga, Kelly McCarthy, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.